Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on all the places: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, at Hawk Blogger. And it's a Blue Friday for both the Seahawks and the Mariners. Good luck to the Mariners in what will be a deciding Game 5 tonight in Seattle, going up against what most people believe is the best pitcher in baseball. And we'll see if the Mariners can pull it out. If they really are a team worthy of World Series conversation, they'll win this game. If they're not, if they don't, then they weren't really going to be a World Series team anyway. So let's see if those boys can pull it off tonight. That'd be a great way to start the weekend for Seattle sports fans. Remember, simplyseattle.com, code HawkBlogger15 gets you 15% off all the great Mariners, Seahawks, Huskies, whatever Seattle sports gear you want. Take advantage while that deal lasts, because it won't last forever. And big weekend for the Seahawks. Huge weekend for the Seahawks. This is another opportunity to prove their worth against a 4-1 Jacksonville Jaguars team on the road. And the idea for today was we were going to have a chance to talk to Mike Sando. He is scurrying on his way. I think he got a little slip up with the schedule, but we'll have him. We'll talk about the state of the NFC. And if you didn't watch the Eagles against the Giants last night on Thursday Night Football, you missed something, to be honest. There was a lot in that game. And I saw that as a Thursday night game, and I'm like, this is going to be ugly. I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong, because Jackson Dart played his little heart out. Cam Scadaboo played his heart out, and the Giants embarrassed the Eagles on Thursday night. It really was not that close. So kind of remarkable to see what happened with that game. I think it is indicative of what's going on in the NFC overall. And I feel a little bit of vindication. Nathan and I went back and forth on Real Hawk Talk on Wednesday night, and my perspective was I'm not that impressed with the Eagles. I don't think the Eagles are the big bad Eagles that they were a year ago. Honestly, I think the Bucs are a more intimidating opponent. I think the Rams are a more intimidating opponent than the Eagles. Doesn't mean that, the Eagles beat both of those teams. I'm well aware. But there's this thing about, process and results. And there's some aspects, like everyone just with the Eagles, every time you bring up any criticism of the Eagles, they like, well, yeah, look at the record. They've won every game, in the last 20 games other than one. And that was the one that Jalen Hurts had to leave. And okay, I get it. But what I'm seeing is a lack of pass rush, questionable coverage, a run game that is a shell of what it was a year ago, an offensive line that is not performing as well as it was a year ago, and a pass game that is never been able to really hold that weight of that team and might be crumbling under the pressure of some unhappy receivers in that situation. So I look at all that and I'm like, I don't know. It has been collectively enough for them to perform pretty well this year, but I just don't see them as this titan that a team like Seattle couldn't hang with. So yeah, we will talk about that with Mike Sando here in just a few moments. I also will be playing for you all my interview with John Benton. I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. It was a great conversation with John Benton, and I think, as far as I know, the first conversation that's been out there with the coach of the Seahawks. So definitely something to hold on for, I should say. That'll be coming up here in a little bit. As we look at the NFC playoff picture right now, I've talked to you guys about this before. It's a problem that the Seahawks dropped 2 conference games. It is. But as of right now, the Seahawks have the 6th seed in the playoffs, and that would have them as a wild card team. So even with that conference record, you got the Vikings behind them with a 1-1 conference record. Right now, the Seahawks are above them because of strength of victory, which is funny, but it's what it is. They also have the tiebreaker over the Commanders, who are 3-2, and the Seahawks play the Commanders in a couple of weeks. They also have the tiebreaker over the Rams, who are 0-2 in the conference. So right now, that's where the Seahawks sit. Right above them are the 2 1-1 Green Bay Packers, and just above them is the 4-2 Philadelphia Eagles. The other teams that are at the top of the chart, top of the standings for the NFC, are the 49ers, the Bucks, and the Lions. And out of that group, I feel like the Lions are the most talented team. I think the Bucks might be the most dangerous. And I hear it. I think the 49ers may win a decent amount of games because of their schedule and because they're good enough to win games on that schedule. That is not a team that I think you should be intimidated to play. If you look at what the 49ers have done so far this year, their most impressive win, I would say, was probably, their division game against the Seahawks and against the Rams. I mean, the win against the Rams was really impressive with all the guys that they were missing. The game against the Seahawks, I think that was somewhat of a gift by Seattle in that game, and it still was not a dominant performance by the 49ers. So with that, let's talk about the state of the NFC with our guest, Mike Sando of The Athletic. How are you doing on this fine Friday, Mike? Oh, I love the hat, man. Oop, you're on mute. There we go. We're going to get you off mute here in a second.
I'm late because I had to get my Mariners hat. I felt like the series depended on me having the proper hat today.
Okay.
So, and I haven't had it out, so we got it.
I feel like I would be not doing my job if I didn't join you in Mariners fandom. So let's do this together, Mike.
We're doing what we can. We're
doing what we can here.
Man. Yeah. So I was listening to what you're saying. So I do something that I think is really interesting every year, and it's only worth doing when we get about this far into the year. So I have this kind of report that shows the year over year change in performance by teams. Okay. And I've got it broken into offensive EPA per game, defense, special teams, but the net is really the difference. Okay. And so, of course, like the biggest improved teams are the Colts, even the Patriots, the Jaguars. But what's so interesting about it to me is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the 5th biggest gain in win percentage and the 5th biggest loss in EPA per game. So what that means is all the teams down at the bottom in their EPA change from last season have worse records except for Tampa. Tampa's 6.3 EPA per game worse this year than last year, but they're way better in their win record. That's because they've won. They're Kansas City chiefing it from last year. Their point margin in their wins is historically low, and it's awesome. Baker Mayfield's my MVP choice right now because of it.
Yep.
But is that a sustainable development? Now, maybe they get healthier. They get Mike Evans back. Maybe their offensive line gets healthier. Maybe they're just stacking wins that easily could have been losses. And by the end, they're going to be even better. That's totally possible. They've got some mojo to them, but I don't know how sustainable that is.
I don't think the small margin of victory is necessarily sustainable, although the Chiefs proved otherwise, at least during the regular season last year. Here's the thing, Mike, is you watch the games just like the rest of us. And there's watching, and I and you both love the numbers, and that kind of
Yeah.
uncovers some things. When I watch the Bucks play, I see a lot of signs of a high quality team that is going to be a massive problem in the playoffs. I also see a team that's doing it with the run game pretty much non-existent. And I do believe when they get their offensive line a little bit back together, they won't get
Yes.
Cody Malk, but they'll get, Gedeke back at right tackle, and you'll get Bucky Irving back eventually. I,
Yeah.
I see a team that I wouldn't want to play them with Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan and Igbuka and Chris Godwin. Like that is maybe the best offense in the in the league.
And you see an imperfect NFC. Now we're going to find out how great Detroit is. I think Detroit's could be really good too. They haven't really played. When you figure Baltimore's not a good team right now, they haven't really played anybody, and they're going to play Kansas City this week, so we'll see. But I mean, it's comical that the 49ers are leading the NFC right now. I mean, for the state that they're in, I don't think they're scaring people with the health of their team. So there is a great path for a Tampa or maybe somebody else to get all the way through this year.
Yeah. So Mike, I'm so curious because you're so level headed, which is one of the things I've appreciated about your analysis all these years. I'm not when it comes to the Seahawks. You know that. I also try my best to not get over my skis because then you just get yourself disappointed. What I see with the
Yeah,
Seahawks is their peak level, whether it's been on offense, defense, or special teams, has been as good or better than any team in the NFC. Not
yeah,
necessarily all at the same time, but their peak play has been as good as any other team's peak play so far.
yeah.
And that hasn't been the case. I wouldn't have said that in past years. I'm curious where you are with that.
I see that too. I do think at a certain time, defensively, that was. I know they're injured, but I mean that was really scary the other day,
Hmm.
and then at home.
Hmm.
I mean, there's something to this thing at home, uh, to me, and I don't know exactly what it is, but they just haven't been the same team. So maybe that evens out. I agree with you that I think that they uh, can can be a team that's advancing in the playoffs this year, and I feel like that I haven't felt that at all in the past because I think their defense was so bad for the last few years that you can't do it, and the offense was kind of mid, really. I mean, it was okay, but so I'm with you to that extent, but I would like to see some more consistency in all three phasing. And I'm confident that the defense is going to be fine with Mike McDonald there. But that was rough the other day, and they do have enough injuries. They have had some injuries there that I want to see that kind of come together as the season goes along. And
Yeah.
the run game's been better, but it's just they're a work in progress right now, and I'm encouraged. But they've let a couple get away that they shouldn't have.
Yeah, I guess when I look at the Seahawks season so far, I'd say the worst game for the offense was week 1 against the
Yep.
49ers. And they've kind of proven that that was the outlier so far. They didn't run their normal game plan. And
Yeah.
interestingly, Mike, their game plan against the Bucks is the closest to their game plan against the 49ers since week 1. They went back to shotgun, they went back to passing more on early downs. Now they were able to actually do something with that game plan. So that's interesting. But in general, that offense since week 1 has been as good as any offense in football. It just has been by
Yeah.
by most metrics.
Yeah, and the quarterback's been really good. I'm super encouraged by a lot of things. I just, I've seen that game before the other day too.
That's my point is if they play that game week 1 offensively, they can lose
Yeah,
to anybody. If they play the defensive game that they played against the Bucks, they can lose
yeah,
to anybody. So it's not
yeah,
just about the
yeah.
ceiling, it is about the floor. Um
And then they're going to go play Jacksonville this week, which is a likely loss, wouldn't you say?
I don't have it as a likely loss.
Just at I've just been there. What's the weather? I've
That's
been there
it's
with
gonna be in the
good
high
teams.
70s. It's gonna be about 60% humidity. So it's not the
Yeah,
worst, but it's a
yeah.
factor. It's certainly a
You've got
factor.
them going 1-1 in their next two, wouldn't you say?
I have them going. I think I have to look closer at where Houston is by the time they get there. I don't think that highly of Houston.
Houston's
Um,
defense is really good, though.
they are. They are. Interestingly, I feel a little bit more confident about how the Seahawks offense can play right now than I do
Yeah.
about how the defense can. But if the Seahawks can put up 17 to 20 points against Houston, I'm not sure Houston's going to keep up with that at this point. But
Houston's one of the most statistically improved teams this season without having the record to show for it. It's interesting.
that is interesting. Like again, when I
Yeah.
watched Houston play Jacksonville, Mike,
Yeah.
that was rough.
Yeah.
That was really
Yeah.
bad football by both teams, and
Yeah.
like dropped passes, and it just looked like very mediocre teams. And Jacksonville, it's interesting. You talk about this weekend. The Seahawks will get credit if they win. Obviously, 4-1, any road win's a big deal.
Yeah.
But if you look at Jacksonville, it's like
It's
a
it,
lot of it's on takeaways that are not sustainable. You talk about unsustainability. Getting 3 takeaways a game, Mike, doesn't happen very often.
no, and they've beaten Baltimore, who's got none of their players, and they've beaten Tennessee, which is terrible. So, but they're close with Jacksonville. They're 1 point from Tampa. They're 5 points from the Rams, and those are games that Seattle could easily lose the same way.
Mhm.
So, um, yeah, I'm just saying. I would bet you they'll be 1-1 and Seattle will be 1-1 in the next two. I don't see the consistency to say they're going to go win at Jacksonville and beat Houston. But we'll
Well,
see.
that would I mean, they have not necessarily put a game like necessary together against 2 straight quality opponents, like that,
Yeah,
so I think that's fair. And, the other part of this is, like, health. I mean, we don't know. It's looking like Julian Love and Devin Witherspoon probably won't play in this game, although we don't have confirmation on that. They will get DeMarcus Lawrence back, and that's pretty big against that Jacksonville run game, but, um as you look across this NFC, the other thing that I'm curious about, Mike, we're getting towards trade season. Like there's been some trades. Even Jacksonville made a trade this week for a cornerback, kind of an odd trade between two players they
yeah.
drafted in the same draft and play the same position, and whatever. Do you anticipate the Raiders moving on from Max Crosby? Do you anticipate the Bengals moving on from Trey Hendrickson, if the
Yeah.
49ers or some other team come calling?
I kind of don't for players that are that high end. Now, I just kind of don't. It doesn't seem to be the MO for because if you're Cincinnati, they're acquiring, right? They just acquired Flacco, and they're looking around the AFC, going, "Oh my gosh, Baltimore's not as good. Kansas City's under 500. Kansas City could be 2-4 after this week, right? If they lose to Detroit." So, I mean, I don't think so at this time. I think you'd have to see more of the free falling, and I don't see Pete Carroll wanting to get rid of his best player on defense. I mean, he's not. I don't think Pete Carroll's there for the 5-year build. I think he's got to try to get this thing flipped around as fast as he can. So, but I would think that Seattle would be in in the buying mode possibly this year.
Yeah, you'd have to think so, and the question becomes like who's going to be selling. And one of the teams that was at least in that conversation was the Giants, who were they 1 and
Yeah,
4 coming into last night, and they have they just drafted Abdul Carter. They've got Brian Burns, who's under contract, who's tied for the NFL lead in sacks, and you've got Kayvon Thibodeau, who's in the last year of his deal, his rookie deal. You'd think that Kayvon Thibodeau would be a guy that they might be looking to move. But then they go out and they beat the Eagles, and they feel a little resurgent behind their rookies on offense. What do you think the
oh
Giants
yeah,
are gonna do?
yeah, exactly. They just lost by double digits to the Saints last week. So I don't see how that Joe Shane and Brian Daboll can be unloading at this time to plan for the future. I don't see how they can do that. I mean, I think they got to try to win as much as they can and help the quarterback as much as they can and try to have something to show for this season. And last night against Philly was a huge step in that direction for them. It had to be a huge relief, a big win for them. So I don't see them having that kind of a long range view uh, when guys are going to get fired if they don't win this year.
We were talking to Mike Sando of The Athletic, one of the best in the biz and a friend of the show for many, many years. Excuse me, Mike. So a team that should be selling, and I think the rumors are starting to percolate, are the New Orleans Saints. Um, I'm curious what your thoughts are there. They've got a couple aging veterans in Demario Davis and Cam Jordan, 36 years old. They've got Rashid Shaheed in the last year of his deal at receiver. You've got Carl Granderson, a pass rusher there, who's 29 and still has a few years left on his deal, has, I think, 4.5 sacks. Do you think the Saints may be a team that is a little bit more aggressive and looking to build for tomorrow and not necessarily today?
Yeah, yes, they should be. Now, that has been a tough mindset for them to adopt, and Mickey Loomis to adopt, but I think that this season has to have shown them at the highest level in that organization what they really are. That's been a place that I think hasn't done a great job evaluating where they're at, right? They've been all in with teams that couldn't do it. So I think this year has to show them. Now they're going to turn their team over to a rookie as well at quarterback, but I think they see this as a rebuild year. They're the lowest cash spending team in the league this year. So yes, they need draft assets. They've been preparing for Shaheed to not be there next year. I think they've made a couple under the radar moves. They acquired an injured receiver from New England, and to me, I look at that as kind of the type of thing you do when you have a little bit more of a long range view. So yes, I think that could be a team. They're old on defense too.
Yeah, they are old, and I mean, Chris Olave could even be a guy, even though they have the 5th-year
Yeah,
option on him. He's another guy, with the concussion concerns they've had, could be on the move. The interesting thing in there, Mike, is maybe a while ago you'd think the Seahawks would be an obvious place to go after Rashid Shaheed. Is exactly the kind of receiver that they didn't think that they had coming into this season. He knows Clint Kubiak and vice versa. I don't know if I see the Seahawks making a move for receiver right now, given the way that JSN, Torrey Horton, Cooper Cup, Derek
yeah,
Young, like
yeah.
Jake Bobo, like, do you see? What's your
Arroyo's
thought?
coming around. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. After week one, I tell you, Brian, I was like, how was I not banging the drum beat that these guys don't have the weaponry? They're going to miss, because they shoot on paper they move on from DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They subtracted a lot. So, but I think since then we've seen a fairly quick evolution of some of these young guys. And Horton's made a huge play in special teams. He's made plays, in big moments as a wide receiver. You love what JSN's doing. So yeah, I don't feel like that's as acute of a need. It doesn't feel like they're necessarily waiting for those guys and hoping that they're going to develop in week 10. It feels like they kind of got some things going. So if they can be healthy, uh, I don't see that as big of a need.
one other team I was curious your thoughts on in that regard, the Cleveland Browns. They trade Joe Flacco, and you've got kind of this situation that's curious. They also trade to add an offensive lineman, so it's not like they are throwing it in the towel, so to speak. But they've got a couple aging last year their contract guards, Wyatt Teller, Joe Bitonio, and that's a pretty valuable position nowadays. Do you think the Browns are a team like that might be willing to move
Yeah.
on from any of their assets?
I do. I think they're always open for business, and so that wouldn't surprise me at all if one of those guys were available. Now they do want to give Dylan Gabriel, their rookie quarterback, who's in the lineup now, I think the best chance he can have. So we don't know for sure how they feel about what they've got behind guys like that, but I think they're clearly in a taking a step back, and they've been totally overspending in recent years, and I think they're in a retool type of mode, even though you would think their coach and GM could be under some pressure this year.
So when you look at the NFC, you kind of stand back and you see what you've seen so far, including this game last night with the Eagles. I want to talk to you about the Eagles a little bit.
Yeah.
Who do you think the class of like, if you had to pick the team to come out of the NFC right now, who
Yeah.
would you feel best about?
Probably Detroit.
Mhm.
And I think we had big questions about their coaching changes going into the year, and that those could still be a factor. But I think that Dan Campbell and their personnel knows who they are, and they've done a good job so far against a somewhat limited schedule. But they're putting up 50 in a game, or 40. That's what you should be doing when you play teams that aren't as good. So a concerning week one loss, but I feel pretty good in their identity. I think Jared Goff is showing that it's not just the coordinator, right? Just like he was sort of written off with the Rams too. Not that he was written off this year, but I think people thought that okay, it's going to be a little bit harder, and it hasn't been. So I think they're the team that has their identity and can play to it better than any other team in that conference right now.
What do you make of the Green Bay Packers and the start that they had, and then the last 2 games that they had?
Yeah.
What do you see there?
I see what I've seen before with them, just inconsistency.
Mhm.
They're a super young team. They're always the youngest team in the league. And, they made a move for Micah Parsons, who's an excellent talent, but I don't know that he's a stabilizing force, right? I don't think they're getting Reggie White, who's going to come in and be a pillar leader of the team. So I still feel okay about them, but I would probably have, Tampa as my next team in the NFC. Uh, that I feel pretty good about before I'd put Green Bay.
Well, and interestingly, in that mix, you didn't say Philadelphia. And the Eagles go and they lose last night. They have this players meeting with Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, who AJ Brown denied it happened, and take Saquon
Yeah,
Barkley. And then they can't run the ball the way they did last year. They can't pass the ball. They never have been able to pass the ball consistently. And the pass rush doesn't seem to be as good. And the coverage doesn't seem to be as good. And even their wins have not necessarily been that
yeah.
impressive. What do you make of this Eagles team?
So I think that they have had such a great offensive line that it's really made everything go for them
Mhm.
and covered for limitations of other things and really let Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley be their best. And I think that this season we're seeing a couple things. One, Lane Johnson, has had a couple stingers. Landon Dickerson's been hurt in and out of the lineup a little bit. And by the way, there's maybe a little bit of a delayed reaction of that Jason Kelsey retired, and he was a great Hall of Famer at center. So I think any one of those things happening is you can be okay. But we might be seeing some attrition on the quality of play of that offensive line. I thought Jordan Mailata, their left tackle, said something kind of interesting that you don't hear much in a moment of whatever it was. He said just about how bad he felt this whole offseason physically, that last year really took a toll with the huge rushing season and all of that. So I think we're seeing some attrition to that offensive line, and there's a huge, almost like a cascading effect to their team on that. That's kind of what I see, because I don't think that all of a sudden Saquon Barkley's totally fallen off, or
Mhm.
or that Jalen Hurts is a different player, or any of those receivers are different players. I think the line is the engine of that team, and it's not as good. And if it's not going to be as good, uh, that will be a challenge for them. They also have a first-year offensive coordinator, and that's
Mhm.
always a. I don't know that he's terrible, but some guys are better than others, right? And so all that being said, they've been a team with question marks early in the year. They were 2-2 last year, I believe. So I think you have to withhold some long-term judgment because they have been able to kind of get it going and there is talent there. But I see a decline in the offensive line that would concern me if I were them.
Well, and if there's been a calling card of a Howie Roseman team, it's been the trenches, and it's been
Mhm.
offensive line and defensive line. And I would make the case that both sides
Yeah.
of the ball took pretty significant steps back. You're talking about Milton Williams gone, Josh Sweat gone. Like you feel the difference there
Yep.
from last year. And Jalen Hurts is such a fascinating player where he's a funhouse mirror. Everyone sees something like wildly different. I think he went from one of the most underrated players a few years ago to now
Yeah.
being one of the most overrated players. I think he's always pretty much been the same guy, a great leader, can be a good scrambler, generally will protect the football, but really limited as a passer and what he can do if you have to like really rely on that.
Oh,
He
yeah.
showed in the Super Bowl he can do that, but that's not his game, and so it feels like there's a lot more pressure on his shoulders this year than there was a year ago.
There is, and I actually give him a fair amount of credit because I put Philly in that New York, New Jersey bucket in terms of difficult markets that have chewed up Sam Darnold's, okay, and have chewed up Daniel Jones's, right? Guys who have gone to much easier markets and done better. right? I give Jalen Hurts. I think that is a very difficult place to be the quarterback, and I think he's done an amazing job of being steady and being, not letting it take him down. But at the same time, he does have some limitations. He's a great story in terms of where he came from and what people thought of him coming out, to what he's been able to do. But the things people thought of him coming out weren't all untrue either, and there are some limitations there, as a passer. So I think we see those when the line isn't as good, and then also, like I said, the coordinating change is a component of this, I think, too, that we don't really know. It's harder to tell, how much of that is a factor. But, um, at a certain point, I think Jalen Hurts is somebody who does need a lot of good things around him, and isn't going to carry it on his own. And that's why, when quarterback tiers comes out and people are like, how come he's not up there in the top tier? He just was the Super Bowl MVP. This is why.
Hmm. Well, I also think that situation in Philadelphia is volatile. And I think the receivers, like, I think that situation, Nick Sirianni is not a he's not Pete Carroll, I don't think necessarily.
Yeah, yeah. Calming presence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so if this becomes challenging for them, if they're going to be dropping games to a 1-4 Giants team, I think this, like, there's a reason that Sirianni has overseen teams start really strong and then finish 1-8 or whatever, and people thinking he's going to get fired because
Yeah.
I don't think that guy handles adversity particularly well, and I'm not sure that team in that market it would handle that well. So I think it's going to be a team to kind of just observe for
Hey,
sure.
they're at Minnesota this next week, which is a challenging defensive team to play sometimes, and it can be a challenging place to play. So I think that will be the Vikings have their own issues, but if you lose three in a row, then it's funny. Then they come home and play the Giants again at home. So I don't know if the Giants are going to beat them again, but um, they got their bye and they're Green Bay, Detroit, Dallas. I mean, those are some tough. They're going to play some teams that are going to put some points on the board.
All right, I got a couple more questions for you. You got a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
All right. So, uh, this is a random one, but I just had to. It seems like a unique situation, so I wanted Mike Sando's take. The Jonathan Gannon situation in Arizona. Hits his player after an inexcusable play, hits him twice. He apologizes. His own club fines him $100,000. I'm trying to think back, when's the last time something like that happened?
Well, where a team find a guy. I mean, I actually remember as a kid, Woody Hayes punched the player on the other team. He was a coach at Ohio State, and he slugged a guy like in the neck area on the other team after a emotional play. And I don't think this was that. This was, uh, I think this was a regrettable thing on the sideline. But I don't get why the team would fire him at 100 grand. To me, when you do that, what the first thought in my mind was like Mike Bidwell, the owner of the team, is a former prosecutor. Like you're building a case.
Oh,
You're turning something into a felony that was a misdemeanor to me. Now, that being said, if Jonathan Gannon has a history of these types of things that we haven't seen, and he's grabbed a player by the face mask and shook him in practice, or is kind of over the edge a lot, and we haven't seen it, and there's a history of this, and they're like, dang it, we're gonna we're going to put down something firm here, or depending what was said on the sideline. We didn't really have the audio, you know, that type of thing can matter a little bit too. Like if he had done the exact same thing physically, it was saying, come on, I believe in you. Do not go in the tank. Dang it. You know what I mean? That would be different to me. Now, I don't think
yeah.
he was saying that, but I think all of those things, um, matter in the context of this. But just from afar, I'm like, the guy apologized. I'm sure I would think he feels terrible about it. And why would you fine him? To me, that makes it more damaging to fine him. Do you agree?
Well, I just found the whole thing fascinating because when I first heard it, I was like, well, did the NFL fine him? Because that seems like a weird
No,
thing
it's
for
a
the NFL
team.
to fine. And then the team does it. I'm like, where does that fine money even go when the team fines their coach?
Yeah. Usually that's fine money goes into a charity thing. It's a good Yeah. Does
Like,
that just
did
mean
Bidwell
did the
just
owner just
claim
make
back
100
some money
grand?
for himself, or,
It's a
I don't
great
know.
question.
It just it seemed a little shocking to me, the whole scenario, and then I look at that Arizona team and talk about another team that feels
Oh,
on the precipice of being, that point, Mike, where you look at your team and you're like, "You know what? The core foundational parts of this team aren't going to sustain what we need." And you realize that, then the only thing you can do is blow it up.
absolutely. And when you look at their games, hey, the last 3 came down to last play, but they're scoring 15, 20, and 21 points. It's not like they are putting up a ton of points and just happen to, that's not good enough. They're going to play Indy this week on the road, then they're going to play Green Bay. So this is definitely a team that could be 2-5 real quick. Now maybe they win one of those and it gives them a huge boost. I think this week's really big for them, and they may not have Kyler Murray. Right? Has he been ruled out?
Not yet, but it sounds like it's pretty
Yeah, trending
questionable.
that way. So I agree with you. I think it's a big year for the coaches there and the quarterback there and everything there. I don't know how many times you can keep trying to do the same thing uh, without having some results. And I think at this point, Kyler Murray just is what he is, and there's going to be limitations to that. And he's expensive, and I think you'd be starting to look for an off ramp at a certain point here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And that brings me to the last topic I wanted to cover with you is Sam Darnold. I
Yeah.
mean, we've talked about him a few times. You wrote about him more last week. You wrote about again this game against the Bucks, how rare this was. The type of game that Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield put up there. So we'll talk about that, but you do the quarterback tiers. You talk to people
Oh
around
yeah,
the league.
yeah.
Like, do you feel like he is outplaying the tier that he was given to start the season?
Absolutely, absolutely. He was put into tier 3 because, solid starter, but needs a lot of help around him because, it was just one season and it ended bad. I think that you don't the good and bad thing about tiers is there's not an overreaction. You don't just, "Wow, he was a 2 last year." It was like, no, when you've kind of been a 4 for a while, you move to 3 and you gotta do it again. I think he's doing it again. I think it'd be very interesting. There's a couple guys like to me, Baker Mayfield had already had enough that he was kind of in the lower part of tier 2. Right now, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Dak Prescott. I mean, these guys should be moving up to the top of tier 2 based on what we've seen this year,
Mm.
if they continue it. To me,
How, I mean, and for both of those guys to be free agent pickups, I mean, how
yeah,
rare is that? Other than like Drew Brees, like it just doesn't happen very often, right?
it just doesn't. The Vikings are a totally unique situation. I mean, you never see somebody win 14 games and then let the quarterback go. In fact, I think I looked at there was like 97 teams, since 1970 that had won 80% of their games in a season. And all of them brought their quarterback back, except for the Vikings twice, let Case Keenum walk, and they let Darnold walk. And then I believe, like, John Elway retired from the Broncos on one year. And I don't remember if maybe Peyton Manning retired from the Broncos or something, but it was like, either you're retired or you're the Vikings moving on from a guy, and it's just, if I'm a Vikings fan, I just have the pit in my stomach going, "God, did we make the decisions for the right reasons here?" And
If Sam Darnold was on that Vikings team, and given what we talked about with the NFC, they potentially are a Super Bowl contender. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I think so.
that is crazy. That is the type of move. As much as I think their GM has made so many savvy moves, and their coaching staff has made so many savvy plays and designs, that is almost all by itself a fireable offense. Like,
Yeah, it
they won't
depends what.
happen,
Yeah,
but like that is, you cannot let the most important position walk out the door like that, and then rely on a guy in JJ McCarthy who we'll find out. But I personally never saw it. I know there's other folks that haven't seen it. Maybe he'll prove all of us wrong, but it looks like that could be a colossal disaster for that front office.
it totally could now. And you talked about savvy moves. I don't think they've drafted well there. I think that they've coached well. I think they've coached well on offense, and they have good personnel on offense. and then they've coached really well on defense. But the moves they've made, they're the highest spending team in the league this year, and they made a bunch of moves to their offensive line and defensive line that aren't working out as expected.
Hmm.
So what I've always wondered about there is, okay, just how unified is everybody there? I think they've made decisions that there's no way you could be unanimous decisions. There's no way that everybody wanted to move on from Darnold. Agreed? There's no way.
Yeah.
It's too hard of a decision. I sense I just can't imagine that an offensive play calling head coach would be like, we got to move on from Darnold, in my opinion. So to me, how this all shakes out, and those guys got new contracts. Maybe it's all fun and everyone's on the same page. But I feel like you said, putting it in those kind of type of historic terms, to me, there's no way everyone agreed with how they handled it internally. So
Well,
that could create issues.
this is where this like market inefficiencies is what comes to mind, Mike, where there's a very generally the free market will set your value appropriately based on what your value is. Like that's generally the way it works. But there are these moments of inefficiency. And one of the things that I think, and you tell me if I'm crazy, but I think it matters for owners. I think it matters for GMs. It matters for coaches who they stand in front of a press conference with as their quarterback. And when Geno Smith had his triumphant year and like was going to be a free agent, I think there's a lot of people that still were like, I am not going to stand in front of my fan base and say Geno Smith is the quarterback we just signed to this massive deal. I think Sam Darnold is in that category as well. I think that that factors in, regardless of their level of play. This is still, quote, Sam Darnold. And are we going to put our names next to his and behind his and tied to his?
Yeah.
I think that plays a role.
But I think they would have done it if they didn't have McCarthy.
Sure.
I think the McCarthy thing is whenever you draft somebody that high, you then do things for the wrong reasons for that guy. And what I mean by the wrong reasons is they get to play even though they're not the best option.
Mm-hmm.
They get to be on the team and have a pass without being good yet, right? That's what the draft capital does. It makes you a favored son, and it gives you a runway that other players don't have. And you're, by the way, the most important position. So if you don't play well, that's really, really tough. And so I didn't love any of the choices they had, but I think if they did not have McCarthy, it would have been totally different. And they offered $15 million a year to Daniel Jones too. So, I think that Daniel Jones wanted to go to Indy because he thought he could beat out Richardson, who was a top pick, but had seen his star fall, versus McCarthy, who's a top pick and is going to need time for his star to fall. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah. And so to me, that's the decision that the Vikings made was, hey, we drafted this guy. That's why we're not willing to stand up there with Sam Darnold and say that this pick we made isn't going to be the guy.
Yeah.
I think that was where they were conflicted. And it made them make a decision that was not the best decision for their football team in 2025.
What do you think the Colts are going to do with Anthony Richardson?
Not have him on their team probably after this year. Yeah. I don't know if someone would want to acquire him or how that would go, but I see it's kind of being
those are some big swings and misses, and so I'll let you go on this, Mike. But as you look at this Sam Darnold season, even if the Seahawks don't necessarily make a huge playoff run, let's say, how does his performance kind of change the future of what you're planning in Seattle, like, and the perspective of what you've got here?
Oh, to me, it's just huge because you don't have to now be putting a bunch of resources into that position. It's a position that you still keep looking, and if you like a guy, you draft him in the third round or whatever. But to me, it just takes a lot of the pressure off, and it allows you to build your team, especially once you pay him. And they're paying him now, but they may pay him again. And if they do, that gives you the contract that you're going to have to build around. And I think that is a good thing for the organization, just a stabilizing force for them. And and shoot, he's 28 years old, and everything I've heard about him behind the scenes is positive too.
Mm-hmm.
Just the type of guy that he is, and he seems to have shown himself to them to be a smart player too, which I don't know that was the full perception of him. I think smart's not the right word to play, but he wasn't always smart with the football. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that he has really impressed them and checked the boxes just as a guy, as a quarterback, as everything. So to me, that's a huge thing for your organization to be able to build around and build the type of team you want to have.
All right, Mike, anything that folks should check out coming up from you?
The Pick Six column will be out on Monday. That's the next thing from me, and look forward to kind of diving into it.
Love it. Make sure you follow Mike Sando. He's at Sando NFL, at least on Twitter, and find him on The Athletic with all the great stuff. Mike, great to see you.
Great to see you. Hey, can I give you one little nugget? See, I don't know if you've done anything on this, but I'll give you one little nugget on the game this weekend. Remember when Robert Saleh accused or complimented the Jaguars for their sign stealing prowess?
Yes.
Okay. And of course, Liam Cohen got all upset. But I just think it's very interesting for Seattle to face Liam Cohen and Liam Cohen's former team in back-to-back games. And so there's probably a lot of communication between Liam Cohen and Tampa Bay's offensive coordinator who worked under Liam Cohen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jacksonville's had this really good defense so far, forcing turnovers. Remember, Patrick Mahomes tipped his cap and said, "Hey, look, they did an unscouted look on that pick six. Like, I checked to the right thing, and they outflanked me by dropping a rusher, which they had not done before." Okay, so I just think going into this week, Seattle's defense is Seattle's just potentially a little bit vulnerable because Liam Cohen's connections to Tampa Bay.
I think that's a good tidbit. I also think there's a fascinating alternate universe where Liam Cohen doesn't return back to Tampa or to Jacksonville for this job, and Robert Saleh gets the job. He was seemingly the next in line, and the 49ers are in a very different place, and the Jaguars are probably in a different place. So there's an interesting
The interesting thing there. So it's just something that this Jacksonville game, I'm just historically wary of having to go there early in the year. So anyway, maybe
I hear you. Matt Hasselbeck would agree. All right.
Yep. Okay. All righty.
That is Mike Sando. Thanks, man. Great to have him as always. Make sure you check him out on The Athletic. And it's true. The guys have actually talked about the fact that they're going to be facing a offense that is probably going to be similar to the one that they just faced and didn't play well against. So that is a factor and something to keep an eye on. In just a moment, I'm going to play for you guys a interview I did with offensive line coach John Benton. It was great to catch up with him yesterday. I've been trying to talk to him or anyone on the offensive line coaching staff really since OTAs. So finally broke through and was able to get that. Appreciate John taking some time. So I'll play that in a second. Before I do that, make sure you check out the Sleeper app. And right now there is a special deal. This is a great place to go to get fantasy information on football. You can follow your baseball stuff. You can follow NBA. And right now they're running a special deal. You don't even have to make a deposit to get $20 for free. No deposit required. Plus, first-time users will also receive up to 100% deposit match, up to $100 total when you use promo code HAWKS. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. And as I said before, make sure you head over to simplyseattle.com. Use code HawkBlogger15. Get 15% off the best Seattle sports gear you're going to wear. See, hat. It's all great. Simplyseattle.com, code HawkBlogger15, and jkboots.com/HawkBlogger, the place to go to get the best boots you will ever own. Love my JK boots. Super comfortable. Look super tough. They feel great. And they're also a Washington-based company. So support local business, support the state, support your own feet with some boots over at jkboots.com/hawkblogger. All right. Let's talk to Mr. Benton. I'll play this for you guys, and we'll talk on the other side. Here is John Benton, the offensive line coach for your Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah.
All right. So we're talking to Seahawks offensive line coach John Benton. First of all, how's Seattle treat you?
I'm really liking Seattle. I've been around the country as a lot of coaches have. And never really spent any time other than to come here and play, but I really like Seattle quite a lot.
Well, you have gotten to move around a little bit, and there's a lot of offensive line coaches that kind of like the rule changes and the practice changes, kind of like, I'm done with this. Why do you stick with it?
Well, it's my love and my passion, I guess. Really, the best part of my day is being with the players and the meetings and practice and that type of thing. So, very tough to give up.
And you played the position as well. What position did you play?
I guess I played everywhere. Not greatly. Spent time at center, guard, tackle, all over.
How much did that experience help shape your philosophy on how you coach the position?
I think quite a lot. I mean, it was obviously a lot of years ago at this point, but
oh, oops. Seems like we got a little bit of an audio issue. Let me see if I can get that figured out. 1 second.
Yeah.
All right. Not sure why that happened. Give me 1 second, guys, and I will try to get that squared away. I think somebody mentioned that this might have happened yesterday, so I'm not sure why that would be the case. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix it while I'm on the air. Depends on if you guys want to hang out, but it might take me a second to get this working. So it was a great conversation, I promise. And I think what I'm going to have to do is try to pull this out. And I think you guys just want to hold on. I will try to get this squared away. Maybe it went into another audio file, but not my favorite moment of the day. But you know what? That's okay. Okay, so I've got it here. It's all there. Let me just drop this in, export it out, and we will see why this was problematic in the first place. I don't know why it did what it did. All right. 2 minutes, guys, and I'll have this hopefully for you. Let's go. Benton 2. Okay. Exporting it out again. Let me go over to import it again. We'll see if we can get this working. Do we have... Okay, that's just 1 minute. Oh, I think I know why. Okay. Delete. Is this fun for you guys listening to this? You enjoying this? I'm sure you are. Delete. Let's add audio and upload, and we will get this up there. I'm just committed to giving you guys this interview because it was good. And let's see, why is this? Okay. Yep. Okay, here we go. Give me a few more seconds. We're almost there. I don't know why this is so problematic, but it is. Did we reach? So talk amongst yourselves. Why is technology so challenging? All right. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Wow. Okay. All right. I think I've got this finally set up, and I will play this for you guys here momentarily. Okay. All right. I think we got it. I'm going to try to share my screen. And it's not going to be exactly perfect, but it will work. And that's all that matters. So let me do this and get this up there for you guys. And we're going to start this all over again. Let me put this up there and add this to stage. And here we go. All right. John Benton interview, take 2. What? What is going on? Oh, here we go. All right. John Benton interview, take 2. Coach, Brian, Benhauser, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. So we're talking to Seahawks offensive line coach John Benton. First of all, how's Seattle treat you?
I'm really liking Seattle. I've been around the country as a lot of coaches have. And never really spent any time other than to come here and play, but I really like Seattle quite a lot.
Well, you have gotten to move around a little bit, and there's a lot of offensive line coaches that kind of like the rule changes and the practice changes, kind of like, I'm done with this. Why do you stick with it?
Well, it's my love and my passion, I guess. Really, the best part of my day is being with the players and the meetings and practice and that type of thing. So, very tough to give up.
And you played the position as well. What position did you play?
I guess I played everywhere, not greatly. Spent time at center, guard, tackle, all over.
How much did that experience help shape your philosophy on how you coach the position?
I think quite a lot. I mean, it was obviously a lot of years ago at this point, but one of the guys that really inspired me to become a coach was my position coach in college, and that's where I kind of really truly fell in love with the game and the technical aspect and mentality of playing offensive line, and decided I'd become a coach at that point. And he still echoes in my head right now. So.
Well, you obviously have focused on zone scheme. That's a priority for you guys, wide zone. And years ago, they did change the rule about backside blocks, and that affected a lot of zone teams. How have you kind of adjusted over time?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. It used to be the mantra, you had to cut, and that was such a huge part of it. And it took a little adjusting to be honest, but at the end of the day, you still have to go win the block first. I mean, we even have that discussion to this day with the players. You go win it first, and then how you finish it, you might cut the guy or not. And then obviously they're saying now you can't in some circumstances. So it ended up, after fighting through it, I guess I'd say, not being as big a deal as I thought it would be.
So, there's some coaches I've talked to, offensive line coaches, who prefer to get vets who know what they're doing and they can just stick them, plug and play. Some prefer to get guys that have a little bit more of a blank slate that they can work with. Do you have a preference on what, young, old, does it matter to you?
No, I like good players, tough, smart guys. So, no, it's interesting you say that. I mean, we're a real young group here.
Yeah.
And, but there's positive, negative to each. They are so eager and ready to work. And like sponges when you try and coach them, that type of thing. At the same time, boy, I've had some of those, gnarly old vets who are grizzled and that type of thing, and they come in and get your room right too. So I've had great experiences with both.
Yeah, so this is the third youngest starting offensive line in the league. Give me your view of let's go through Abe and Charles to start with.
Yeah, very good player. They've obviously both played a lot of football. So age doesn't come into play as much with those two, as maybe a Sundell or Gray, Zabel, who seems like every week there's another big lesson they have to learn. But that's what it is, They just haven't seen as many things when you're young. So they're going all out of what they know, and there's some adjustments to be made. At the same time, it's fun to watch them develop from that standpoint too.
And there's been a fair amount of talk about Gray, and love to hear your thoughts on him. But there's not been as much talk about Anthony Bradford. I'm curious your thoughts on what he brings and where he can still develop.
Yeah, as far as Anthony's concerned, he's a physical presence for us. He's still working on other parts of his game as a young player, that type of thing. And I think he's taken good strides, particularly in the last 2 games. He had a real good spring. Things started moving a little quick for him for a while, but it seems like it's coming to him now, and hopefully we're keep climbing
And then the guys that people just don't know as much about. Bryce Cabledew, Mason Richmond, some of these younger guys that are, waiting in the wings. What have you seen from them?
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure with those guys. I mean, I might not have had in my career a whole group of rookies, which we have 6 in the room right now, which is incredibly high number, but they're all legitimate. Like, it may take a little more time for one or the other to start seeing the field and contributing, game to game, but they've all got what it takes. If things go well for them, they'll be playing in this league.
All right, a couple more questions. I'll let you go. So, outside zone has been like the focal point. You guys have actually had more success on your inside zone so far. And any thoughts about why that might be?
Yeah, that's actually not that unusual. We base everything off the outside zone, and then you have your counters for how they're going to play you. So obviously inside zone's been a counter for us and been good to us, and that'll cycle back too, but that's really just where we start, from outside zone. But just like every NFL team, we run gap schemes, inside zone, anything you name.
So the other thing is, a lot of folks, when they talk about sacks and pressure, they always focus on the offensive line. But it seems like tight ends, receivers, quarterbacks all play a big role. How do you feel like this team and the guys outside the offensive line room are contributing to the pass protection?
Quite a bit. You hit the nail on the head. It is truly a team stat. Obviously, a bad offensive line, you're going to have bad production no matter how the others contribute. So, I mean, that's a credit, but the timing of Sam getting the ball out on time is as big as anything. Our tight ends and obviously running backs, but more than other places, maybe our tight ends are so involved in our protections and really done a great job. It provides us not only the good blockers, but it provides us a number of protection schemes so we can stay ahead of the protection beaters of the other team and that stuff. It's been really nice here. It goes to receivers too. If they're not where the quarterback needs them, you get held balls, and then held balls or sacks.
John, appreciate it. Welcome to Seattle.
Oh, appreciate you.
All right. Take care. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, everybody. We did it. The John Benton interview has been heard, and thankfully I was able to edit audio, export audio, and upload audio in time for you guys to get to hear it during this episode of Hawkblogger Morning. So, and I've also now fixed it over on patreon.com/Hawkblogger, as well as wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find that full interview up there. There's some interesting things in there. You heard him talk about Anthony Bradford as having a strong spring, and then the game seemed to get a little fast for him, acknowledging that not necessarily getting the level of play he wants. Interestingly, he feels like the last 2 games were steps forward for Anthony Bradford. That happens to coincide with his 2 lowest pass protection grades from PFF. I will tell you all again, because I get hammered by Josh Cashman and Evan Hill and everybody else on the Hawkblogger crew and everyone outside the Hawkblogger crew about how bad he is, how bad Anthony Bradford is. And I'm not like, the fact that I think he is a league average guard makes me like his biggest supporter. I'm never saying he's like a Pro Bowler or anything like that, but I think people don't realize what the state of league average guard play is in the NFL right now. At the same time, I went back and I was like, all right, I got to see for myself. I've watched every single snap of his in Arizona, every single snap of his against Tampa Bay, and I don't see a 0.0 pass protection situation with Anthony Bradford. I'm not saying that's a strength of his, but I think if you go and watch every snap, it is not the colossal disaster that is keeping this offense from being able to operate that everybody wants to imply. And if he can make strides, great. And if not, part of the reason I asked the coach, Benton, about Bryce Cabledew and Mason Richmond and the guys waiting in the wings, they're all young players. And so I wanted to hear from him whether or not he thought that those guys might have a chance to step forward. And he seems pretty bullish on those guys. Now, whether it's this season or next, that's to be decided. But, it starts to become more of a possibility later in the season if Anthony Bradford struggles and these other guys then start to take steps forward, then the coach might be willing to take that risk. So we will see. I'll just I think that if people don't think he's a league average guard, I don't think you guys are watching other guards play. There's a lot of really, really, really bad guard play. And I've talked about this before. There's just, yeah, it's really, really bad out there. And by the way, for everyone that's like, oh, his PFF grade's so bad, Gray Zabel's got a really bad PFF grade too. So unless you think it's not applicable when it's on Gray Zabel, but it is applicable to Anthony Bradford, it's a little bit contradictory. I think Gray Zabel's been really good. So other things that I wanted to kind of share, I talked about this in that interview, was the kind of the run game and what's been working versus not. And I kind of got this breakdown of where things have been going for the Seahawks and in the run game. And one aspect of it was on their zone runs, they have 7 of their 13 explosive runs have come in zone, 6 have come in gap. And when you get down to specific run concepts on inside zone, they're averaging 4.5 yards, almost 4.6 yards per carry. 5 of their explosive runs have come on inside zone. Outside zone, they're only averaging 3.1 yards per carry. They have 2 explosive runs. When they've done man blocking, and these are things like, duo and other things like that, they have a 4.7 yard per carry average with 2 explosive runs on only 18 rushing attempts. So one of the things that's interesting is when they're running inside, they are having their most success. I think that is a Gray Zabel and potentially a Jalen Sundell related metric. The other thing here is their best running set right now is if they are using pullers. When they use pulling guards or tackles, they're averaging 6.3 yards per carry, and they've had 3 explosive runs on 13 rushing attempts and 2 touchdowns. So that is incredible production on, a part of their run game that they have not used very much. And the thing that sticks out for me there is a year ago, it was when they started to use a lot of this, oh my gosh, what's the phrase? It's pull and pick. I can't think of it. Anyway, when they're pulling their blockers, when they're running counters, they started to go off last year in the run game. So I just wonder if there's something there that they might start to learn when they continue to self-scout. If you want to know about the difference in the players, Ken Walker has averaged 5.5 yards per carry on zone runs. He's averaged 3.7 yards per carry on gap runs. Zach Charbonnet has averaged 2.4 yards per carry on zone runs and 3.6 yards per carry on gap runs. So they've kind of been the opposite of where I think people expected. They thought Charbonnet was a better fit for the zone stuff and that Walker might be a better fit for the gap stuff. That's been the opposite to this point. So anyway, just wanted to share that bit with you guys. Also, I think the fact that the Seahawks are running as much 12 personnel as they are with 2 tight ends has made things pin and pull. Thank you, Jeff Langston. Yes, pin and pull. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. Running as much 12 personnel has helped them with their pass protection. It has helped them with their run blocking. And I think that also is a factor. I think the fact that the quarterback is playing on time is a huge factor. And to what the coach said, the receivers getting to the right spots at the right time allows the quarterback to operate quickly. So all those pieces are kind of coming together to alleviate the amount of pressure that was on that offensive line. So even when you have a player like Anthony Bradford that is struggling in pass protection, it doesn't ruin the whole offense. You're still able to function. So, all right. I think that will do it for this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Make sure you give the show a like, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, all those places. I would appreciate it. And let me see. I think there's a couple super chats here. I don't want to miss these. Aziz Rashid says, since the fourth quarter of the Cardinals game, the Seahawks defense has been shredded. No in-game adjustments whatsoever. What say you? Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's some stuff to be dealt with on the coaching side for sure. At the same time, the Thursday night game to me felt like short week, missing some players, guys start to get gassed, and shit happens. I'm not going to like kill them for a game where for 3 quarters they had held the Cardinals to 6 points and dominated that game and had 6 sacks in that game. So I don't think that they were bad in that football game. And then against the Bucs, we've talked about it a bunch. I mean, that was as bad as you can play in coverage and in rushing and in tackling. And when you do all those things, you're not going to win many games. So, yeah, it was really bad. And it is a test this weekend to go up against a 4-1 team playing at home that just beat the Chiefs and plays a similar style of offense to the one you just got shredded by. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is anywhere close to Baker Mayfield. I don't think this offense is anywhere close to Tampa Bay's, but we'll see. And we will find out later today whether or not the Seahawks will have any part of their secondary between Tariq Woolen, Julian Love, Devin Witherspoon available for this game. If not, then it becomes that much harder. But you know what? Everybody is missing a lot of players. So there's just no excuses. End of the day, you got to find a way to still be functional. Adam the Islands says, with how poorly the Ravens are playing, all things considered with Lamar Jackson, could Baltimore be a candidate for trade options? Maybe. I think a team that had Super Bowl aspirations is going to have a hard time giving up on a season so soon. Last time I saw, Baltimore was still the favorite for the division, even with what's gone on to start their season. So let's see. All right, folks. Have a great rest of your day. I am Brian M. Hauser. This has been an episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take